If you were to open up your phone right now and just scroll to the very bottom of your Notes app, what would you actually find down there?
Oh, man, a total mess probably.
Right. For most of us, there is a literal digital graveyard down there.
No.
It is just packed with, half-written sentences, midnight brainwaves, and those little flashes of inspiration that we fully promised ourselves we would circle back to when we had more time.
Yeah, you usually see things like an untitled note from like 3 years ago that just says, better way to organize coffee cups or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or a random business name with absolutely zero context.
Yeah, and we look at those fragments, we feel that brief spark of the original excitement, and then inevitably we just close the app and get pulled right back into our busy routines.
We just leave those ideas to gather dust. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are heading straight into that digital graveyard. Today, we're analyzing a really fascinating slide deck and a video presentation transcript that deconstructs a system called the One Idea Action Pack.
Right, and this framework was developed by Wisdoms, which is the same group behind the difference makers in Every City project.
Yeah, and the source materials focus entirely on a very specific, universal problem. They ask how we can take vague, unshaped thoughts, the ones we hoard in our phones and journals, and push them through a mechanical process to transform them into tangible, real-world value.
It's all about moving from abstract to concrete.
Exactly. So the stated mission for today is to figure out how to rescue our best concepts and structurally force them into reality. Okay, let's unpack this. Why do we hoard all these ideas but never actually pull the trigger?
Well, the easy assumption is usually that we lack capital, right? Or we assume the market just won't care.
Sure, that's what we tell ourselves.
But the sources actually argue that most brilliant ideas don't die from a lack of funding or market rejection. They die from a psychological trap that they call someday syndrome.
Someday syndrome.
Yeah, someday syndrome is this pervasive belief that, well, someday the conditions will be perfect. You tell yourself that someday you will have the free time, the excess energy, and a flawless, totally risk-free plan.
Right, but that day never actually comes.
Exactly, because without a mechanical system forcing the idea forward, someday just functions as a permanent placeholder to protect your ego from the discomfort of actually starting.
Wow, that really hits home. And it brings up the whole issue of willpower. Because relying on sheer motivation to get an idea off the ground, it feels a lot like trying to push a broken down car uphill while it's in neutral.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, like if you push with every ounce of strength you have, it works for a minute, the car inches forward. But eventually your muscles give out, you literally run out of gas, and the car just rolls right back down to the bottom of the hill.
That's a perfect way to look at it. And the sources actually map that analogy directly onto a psychological concept known as ego depletion.
Okay, what is ego depletion exactly?
So, we tend to treat willpower as if it's an infinite magical well that we can just draw from whenever we want. But neurologically speaking, it is a highly finite resource.
Like a battery.
Exactly like a battery. Ego depletion means you literally run out of the cognitive fuel required to force yourself to do difficult, friction-heavy tasks over a sustained period. Your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain handling complex planning and impulse control, it gets completely exhausted by the micro decisions of everyday life.
So that implies you physically cannot just will a complex idea into existence over the long term.
Right. Relying on sheer willpower is a fundamentally flawed strategy for execution. Your brain just gets tired. I mean, the daily friction of your actual job, your family, your life, it all gets in the way.
Yeah, life just happens.
So you need an architecture that mechanically forces action rather than relying on the naive hope that you will wake up feeling incredibly motivated every single day for 6 straight months.
Which nobody does. So if the mechanical failure is relying on a finite supply of willpower, what is the underlying mental block causing the friction in the first place? I mean, even when people do have free time, say, on a random Saturday, they still hesitate to build out their ideas.
Yeah, that's a huge point. The presentation highlights a concept they call vertical anxiety.
Vertical anxiety.
They define this as the paralyzing fear that if you step off your traditional career path to pursue an unproven concept, you will lose your place in the world and ruin all the hard-earned progress you've made.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
The sources contrast two very different ways professionals view their own trajectories. The first is the static ladder, which represents the traditional industrial era mindset.
Okay, the static ladder.
In the static ladder view, your career is a fragile vertical climb. One misstep, one failed side venture, and your progress is totally ruined. You fall down a rung. In that paradigm, any hardship, failure, or detour is categorized strictly as wasted time.
I mean, I have to play devil's advocate here because, well, framing a failure as wasted time isn't entirely irrational, right?
Sure.
If I take 6 months to try and build a new software platform and it completely tanks, I still have a mortgage to pay. It's easy for a slide deck to say, don't be anxious, but there is tangible, real-world risk involved in stepping off that ladder.
hmm
How does someone practically stop feeling like a failure when an idea doesn't pan out?
The sources answered that exact concern, and I am so glad you brought it up. They introduced an alternative framework called the R&D Lab Mindset.
R&D Lab, like research and development.
Exactly. And they acknowledge the financial realities, of course, but they argue for a fundamental reframe of what a failure actually yields. In the R&D Lab mindset, your career is a dynamic narrative, not a fragile glass ladder.
Good.
If you try an idea and it doesn't work out, the time isn't wasted because the goal wasn't just to make $1 million. The goal was also to run an experiment. You are stress testing your own resilience and, most importantly, gathering proprietary data. And this is the part that gets me so excited.
Wait, so even a completely failed experiment generates useful data?
Yes. It generates data that literally no one else has. You learn about friction points in a specific market. You learn how supply chains operate. You learn what human behaviors are hard to change.
That's huge.
You aren't falling down a ladder. You are running an experiment in your personal laboratory. Every detour is just data collection for the next breakthrough. You are building a highly specialized worldview.
So why is gathering this specific proprietary data and shifting our mindset from a ladder to a lab so critical in our current environment? I know the sources dedicate a significant amount of time to the shifting economic landscape.
They do, and they frame this within the emergence of what they call the wisdom economy.
The wisdom economy.
Right. Look at traditional knowledge-based work. If your job is essentially a static checklist of tasks, processing forms, basic coding, routine analysis, automation, and artificial intelligence are rapidly catching up to it, routine knowledge is just becoming a commodity.
Yeah, we are seeing whole industries
Mm-hmm.
aggressively optimizing those routine tasks out of existence.
Absolutely. But what cannot be easily automated is specialized human insight. An algorithm can process data all day long, but it struggles with deep contextual judgment. It cannot easily navigate highly complex, emotionally nuanced human situations.
Right, because it's just code.
Exactly. In the wisdom economy, those deeply human traits, synthesis, empathy, and lateral problem solving, command a massive premium.
Which makes the proprietary data gathered in the R&D lab highly valuable.
Yes, exactly.
Under this new model, past life experiences, including the failed ventures, they aren't just dead weight on a resume. They become tangible assets. They translate into transferable wisdom that an algorithm literally cannot replicate.
You take your unique observations of the world, the specific frustrations you've noticed, the inefficiencies you've experienced, and you synthesize them. That synthesis is the currency of the wisdom economy.
Okay, so we've established the value of human insight, and we've mapped out the psychological barriers like someday syndrome and vertical anxiety. But the core question remains: how do we mechanically bridge the gap from a vague thought in a notes app to real-world execution?
Right, the how.
This is where the presentation introduces the One Idea Action Pack. And the speakers are highly emphatic about clarifying what this system is not, aren't they?
They are. They explicitly distance it from the typical self-help space. It is not a fluffy motivational concept, and it is definitely not a generic, bot-generated list of steps on how to start a business.
They describe it as a success-architected physical blueprint. And what really stands out in the transcript is the unbelievably wide spectrum of ideas this system claims to handle.
It's pretty wild.
They explicitly mention that it was used to map out a massive infrastructural innovation specifically, re-engineering a failed $80 billion transit system.
Right.
But then they say it also handles community-level solutions like creating legacy circles and even everyday frustrations like rethinking how we use the common toilet.
What's fascinating here is how the system handles that disparity. The presentation outlines that the One Idea Action Pack does not use a one-size-fits-all template.
Oh, okay.
The first mechanical step is that the system identifies the specific type of idea you have proposed. Once it categorizes the concept, it applies a specialized framework tailored to that exact category.
So it adapts.
Yes, this is what allows it to be idea agnostic, scaling from an $80 billion transit issue down to a plumbing redesign.
Okay, and then the system forces the idea through what they call a transformation pipeline, right? Which is designed to replace vague hope with strategic certainty.
Exactly.
The pipeline moves the concept through 3 distinct stages. First is the idea stage, where the concept is unshaped and entirely contained in your head. Then it forces it into the possibility stage.
And the possibility stage is really the heavy lifting of the framework. This is where the system deconstructs the initial thought. It reveals hidden opportunities and unseen angles that the creator might be too close to the project to see themselves.
It gives you some distance.
Yeah, and it estimates the potential value creation. Finally, it pushes the deconstructed concept into the action stage, which generates a practical roadmap designed specifically for that kind of idea.
Let's dissect the actual, tangible output of this pipeline. The sources explain that the output is a personalized, 12-page, printed strategic blueprint.
A physical blueprint, yeah.
Phase 1 of this blueprint is entirely focused on deconstructing the idea using 4 specific pillars. First, it clarifies the absolute core essence of the idea, stripping away all the secondary noise.
Getting to the heart of it.
Second, it discovers those hidden angles. Third, it seeks to understand by defining exactly who benefits from the idea and what fundamental difference it makes to them. And fourth, it evaluates the realistic financial, personal, and social impact.
And following that deep analysis, the blueprint provides 3 incredibly specific mechanical features designed to cure inertia.
Okay, so feature number 1 is the Opportunity Scorecard. The sources describe this as a custom, data-driven diagnostic metric that measures your idea's true market and social potential.
The Opportunity Scorecard is crucial because it removes the emotional bias. Often we paralyze ourselves because we simply don't know if an idea is objectively good.
We just sort of guess.
Right, we rely on our gut feeling, which is super vulnerable to imposter syndrome. By providing a data-driven metric, the blueprint gives you an empirical foundation to justify investing your time.
That makes total sense. Then feature number 2 is the simplest experiment. The blueprint designs the lowest friction method possible to test the hypothesis in the real world over the next 30 days. How does that practically lower the risk we talked about earlier with the R&D lab?
It lowers risk by preventing over-engineering. The natural human tendency is to think we need to build the entire product before we can test it at all.
Oh, for sure.
Like, if you want to open a restaurant, you think you need a lease, a commercial kitchen, and a full menu. The simplest experiment mechanic forces you to find the cheapest, fasting proxy.
Give me an example.
Maybe you just need to sell one type of sandwich out of a local coffee shop for a weekend. It isolates the core assumption of your idea and tests it with minimal financial and emotional exposure.
Okay, and that leads directly to feature number 3, the 7-day sprint. This is a step-by-step roadmap to force momentum in your very first week. Yeah. But I have to push back here, though.
Go for it.
If someone is fundamentally lacking motivation, how does a 12-page document actually force them to take action? I mean, a roadmap is still just words on a page.
That is a very fair question. The mechanism at play in the 7-day sprint is something called cognitive narrowing.
Cognitive narrowing.
Starting a new venture is a massive, daunting task. When the human brain looks at a project that requires hundreds of steps, it gets overwhelmed by the cognitive load and simply shuts down. That's ego depletion kicking in before you even start.
Right.
The 7-day sprint bypasses this by breaking the massive task down into highly structured, microscopic pieces.
So it shrinks the requirement.
Exactly. The genius of the architecture is the final step. Step 7 of the sprint ends with a single commitment. It dictates just one practical, highly achievable action to take in the next 24 hours.
Just one thing.
Yes. You don't tell someone to build a brick wall. The cognitive load of a wall is way too high. You tell them to mix the mortar and lay one single brick as perfectly as they can before tomorrow.
I love that.
By shrinking the timeline to 24 hours and the scope to one action, the system makes the psychological friction of not doing it higher than the friction of just getting it done.
Wow. Okay, so the sources detail a specific way listeners can actually run their own concepts through this system. Wisdoms is currently running a founding pilot program and seeking 50 early adopters. And the barrier to entry for these pilot participants is set at just $9 or 99 Rand.
The incredibly low cost is a really interesting strategic decision. From an analytical perspective, they're clearly not trying to monetize the blueprint at this stage.
No, $9 is nothing.
By removing the financial barrier, they're incentivizing a high volume of diverse ideas to flow into the system. It's a way for the creators to gather their own proprietary data and stress test their claim that the transformation pipeline is truly idea agnostic.
And the documentation emphasizes that the submission process is highly secure and completely confidential. They use the phrase, "You provide the idea, the system provides the framework."
It's an exchange.
Right. You submit the dormant thought, the system categorizes it, applies a relevant action-back framework, and returns the 12-page strategic blueprint. It literally acts as the mechanical bridge from the quiet corners of your brain to the real world.
The system effectively democratizes the kind of strategic analysis that is usually reserved for corporate boardrooms or, really expensive consulting firms. It makes it totally accessible to individual intuition.
Okay, let's bring all these threads together. We started by examining the digital graveyard of our notes apps, exploring how someday syndrome and ego depletion drain our willpower and trap our best ideas. And we analyzed how vertical anxiety keeps us clinging to the fragile static ladder, when the changing economic landscape actually demands we treat our experiences like an R&D lab.
Because in the wisdom economy, your highly specialized human insight and your ability to observe the world deeply are your greatest assets. They generate the proprietary data that automation just cannot replicate.
Finally, we broke down the one idea action pack as the mechanical solution. It identifies your idea type, runs it through a transformation pipeline, and hands you a personalized blueprint featuring an opportunity scorecard, the simplest experiment, and a 7-day sprint that narrows your cognitive load down to one single action in 24 hours.
The entire framework forces a radical shift in perspective. It demands that you treat your idle daydreams as vital data points waiting to be tested in reality.
Which leaves us with an entirely different kind of question to consider as we wrap up today. We've talked extensively about the personal cost of someday syndrome. The regret of not pursuing your own potential. But if we pull the lens back and look at the bigger picture, consider the macroeconomic cost.
Oh, that's a big one.
If millions of people are currently walking around with brilliant, nuanced solutions to everyday problems locked in their notes apps out of fear or fatigue, what happens to a society when its collective intuition is permanently archived?
It's a staggering thought, really. What critical innovations, community solutions, or paradigm-shifting businesses are we structurally missing out on as a species simply because the people who thought of them lacked a mechanical system to lay the first brick?
The next major leap forward might not be hiding in a massive corporate laboratory. It might be sitting as a half-finished sentence on a distracted commuter's phone. So thank you for joining us for today's deep dive into the One Idea Action Pack. Take a hard look at your own digital graveyard today and ask yourself which of those ideas is waiting for its first brick.